with Sara Espanet, Megan Schmittel, and Sharon Stelzer, who are going to talk to us about how you can prepare for breaks from school in advance of our upcoming summer vacation. Our presenters will begin with a presentation, and then remaining time will be spent on question and answer. Please put your questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation. Tonight's session will be recorded and will be available on the Charge Syndrome Foundation website. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Great. Thank you, Lily. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So thank you for joining us. As Lily said, we're going to be talking about preparing for vacation and holidays. So our presentation will cover schedule systems for home, ways to structure fun, social stories, going out into the community, and communication systems for home. All right, so let's get started with schedule systems. As we know, a lot of individuals with charge syndrome do really well with the schedule system. Calendar systems and schedule systems are a great way to provide information about what is going to happen. It helps to reduce anxiety and provide clarity about what our day is going to be like. And when our kids are leaving school, which is a very structured place, to going home where things might be a little bit more relaxed, it's really important to carry over those schedule and calendar systems to help continue alleviating that anxiety and providing them with information that's important to know about their day. So when we're thinking about a calendar system for home, we need to remember that it does not need to be exactly the same as a school calendar. Home and school are always different. So the calendar systems can be the same as well. As long as your child's mode of communication and literacy are both being used, then you can make whatever changes are needed for home to make it work for you. An example I always like to share is a student at school who uses a handwritten schedule. If you're out in the community and you need to write a schedule down, you can just make a list on a scrap piece of paper. Doesn't need to be pretty, doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to provide that information to help provide the information on what's happening and to reduce that anxiety. So let's look at some examples. So this is the school schedule. It's very structured. It's robust for curriculum. It targets those objectives. And it's really hard to duplicate at home. At school, we have access to these materials to create this more complex schedule system. So for home, maybe we make a few changes. This schedule is a 2D photograph of all of the schedule objects that the student is using. It still provides that structure, but this schedule is different. It has the ADLs and the home routines, things that still works for the family. It's less formal, but it's still organized. And this structure is one that could also be easily carried around. So the 2D pictures, they're a lot easier to slip inside your pocket when you're going out and about, and to carry around with you. Now, just to mention, the student did a lot of work with their SLP to ensure that they could go back and forth between 2D and 3D objects. Here's another one. School schedule, again, highly structured. In this one, it's one schedule item being shown at a time. It's in a binder that is carried around, and it indicates what time it is. Carrying a binder might not be that easy to do when you're at home, and you might want to switch it up. So for this schedule at home, we use these clear sleeves. And what you can do is print out maybe the first 3 things that you're going to do for the day, put them in that clear sleeve, and use a whiteboard marker to just check them off when they're finished. It's really focused on those home routines. It works for the family. And again, it's less formal and it's still organized. And for this schedule, it's not labeled with times. It's labeled by 1, 2, and 3. So it gives you that flexibility to ensure that you have breakfast at a leisurely pace like you do when you're at home instead of a more strict lunch schedule when you're at school. So when we're thinking about these calendar systems, you want to make sure that you're using the resources that you have at school to get what you need. So ask your child's teacher to send home a copy of the symbols or to email the symbols to you so you have them saved on your computer. Ask your students' teachers for the photos that they're using in the classroom for communication, or take new photos of the objects that are being used at home. If they're using whole objects, have them send you an inventory of what's being used and set up a meeting to work together to figure out how you can collaborate to create a schedule that's going to be meaningful for your child at home. In creating those clear routines for vacation, create a vacation calendar. This could communicate days that are spent at home versus elsewhere. So to do this, you could simply take a calendar, a pre-made calendar, and indicate with a picture or writing the word that this day is spent at home and maybe this day is spent on vacation at the beach, or the next day might be spent at grandma and grandpa's house. And then setting up a daily schedule for your child, incorporating those activities that are morning, noon, and night, or if your child needs it, more time structured. So establish routines for activity choices, and ensuring activities have a clear beginning, middle, and end are also very important when we're thinking about our routines for vacation. I'll hand it over to Sharon to talk about ways to structure fun.
To structure fun. So typically when we think about that, we just have fun. But we know for so many of our students and our children who have charge syndrome that they really crave that structure. And even the fun that they enjoy needs to have some kind of structure. I've been a teacher for a really long time, and so many times some of my students are in the moment, but they want to know what's going to happen next. So they really can't even enjoy because they have to know what's happening next. What's first? What's second? What's going to happen third? So really thinking about that, I think an important concept that Sara mentioned and that will be throughout the whole presentation is thinking about routines and creating those routines for vacation. Choices is a great way to incorporating things for our students to do and think for having things that they want to do. So if we offer choices, we create lists, because we know so many of our students with charge syndrome, lists are our best friend. Really thinking about that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. I think making games out of activities is a really great way to do that. And I'm going to show you some examples of how I've done that with some of my students that I've taught in the past and how I still think about it with current students. We're going to talk about incorporating chores and the real stuff that you have to get done. So we know on vacations, it's not just, even though it's school vacation for your children, it's really sometimes not vacation for you guys. You might have to go to the doctors. You might have to still work. You might have to get stuff done in the house. Then you have to think about back to school shopping, all of those kinds of things. So how do you think about that? And all of that can be incorporated into ways to involve your children. We're going to talk a little bit about theme days. And this is the one I had the most fun with. I was telling Sara earlier, I said, this is the slide that I love the best, really thinking about that. And we'll talk a little bit about that next. Sarah, go ahead. Thanks. So when we're thinking about choices, I'm going to say use the word choice board. It could just be a pictures or lists for some ways for things for your child to select activities to do. So, for example, you control the choices. So if you know your child would love to go to the beach every single day, but you don't have the capacity to go to the beach, or it's a rainy day and you can't go to the beach, or the car broke down and you can't go to the beach, maybe beach isn't on the list of choices for your child. So really thinking about making the choices something that's realistic. You can incorporate familiar things that you know your child would like to do, but maybe you add some new activities that could be broaden their horizons. So maybe they've never been to, I don't know, a particular store, or maybe they've never been to a particular park, but that could be a new choice that you could try out with your child. Offer the choices with your child. Help them create the list with you. And just because they list everything in the whole wide world that they would like to do, I would like to go see Taylor Swift, I would like to go to the mall, I would like to go to California. All of those things, you can brainstorm a list, and then you could pick the top 2 or 3 to put on the list, or you could turn take. That's a great tool. You know, you pick one, then mom picks one, dad picks one, their sister picks one, and then we go back around the list. So we have that. So everybody has a piece of the choice boards, and they really can think about how to create the list. But remember, you as the parents or the teachers, you're kind of in charge of the list and what's going to be on there. And maybe that, you know, thinking about what's realistic and what's not realistic. Maybe there's a big trip like to go to Six Flags, and that's for a special day or something that they can earn after a while. So let's talk about the next choices to do. So I'm big about sending home lists with kids. And I know these lists are a little bit dated. On the left, it says 10 fun things to do on vacation. And I worked with a classroom of teenagers and trying to get them to be involved in doing other things than just sitting in front of the computer or watching television the whole time they were on vacation. I made a motivation little checklist, and anybody could do this at home. So we agreed upon what they would like to do is they could earn a minute of extra special computer for everything that they did on the list. And if they came up with a bonus item, they also earned time. So we brainstormed this list together as a classroom. So like I said, it's a little bit dated. So one of them was make brownies. They wanted to play the Wii, hence the dated. They could play on the computer like a PlayStation game. One of my students wanted to make pudding. They wanted to go bowling or to the library. We had a little contest for every book. They could keep a log. And we were, like I said, we were big on earning points and earning extra computer. Play a board game. They could do a puzzle. Then they could do a craft project. But if they did a craft project, they either had to take a picture or bring it to school. So they couldn't just say, I did it. We had to have a little proof there. Another vacation, we did things to be active. We had done a whole unit on health, and we were trying to see, you know, what they could do to be active. And they came up with this list, and I thought it was really interesting. One of my students said they could bring out the garbage can or bring them in if they were too heavy to bring out, go to the mailbox, bring in the mail, help walk the dog. We could have a dance party, yoga, exercise. So lots of different things within the house that they could do to be active. So those were just some of the things that we came up with. And parents in my classroom, I don't know if they loved me or hated me because I was always sending them home with lists. Here's some things to do at home. So other things, so one of the things that we were thinking about to be active is we have a yoga club at school, and one of our physical therapists, they came up with these pictures of yoga poses. They're all animals. And one of the young men, he picked a couple of poses. He goes, you can show me in the camel pose. So here's a picture of the students, and each student has their own yoga book. So as they mastered different poses, they added the pose of the picture of them doing the pose next to the cartoon picture of them in the yoga book, so that they could create their own yoga book and keep adding pages. And this is something that I can share the template for anybody who's interested. We're going to put it on the resource page. So this young man is doing the camel pose. In the next slide, there's a little girl. She's doing downward dog. And so they call it just the dog pose. And her teacher's next to her modeling and encouraging her to do that. She's on a mat. And because she needed a little more sensory input, the physical therapist had a little disc for her to put her hands on. And this is something that you can work with your child's physical therapist to get some great ideas on what to do. So I think I just put a few ideas for activity ideas. I love a game night. My family, we're big gamers, and we're always coming up with different kinds of games, and depending on who's playing, if it's the younger children playing or older, we're always trying to think of different kinds of games. So you could use commercial games such as Uno or Connect Four. Pop-Up Pirate is a really nice game that our occupational therapists like. It's a cause-effect game where you put a little stick into a barrel, like it looks like a ship, and then you try to get the pirate to pop up. You could do movement games, so you could do laps around the house, around the yard, the neighborhood. You could play follow the leader in the house, around the yard, on the driveway, all kinds of different things. You could take turns who's going to be the leader, who Simon Says kinds of games. Anything with modeling, our students really like. On a rainy day, you could build a fort indoors. You could spend a whole, 15 minutes thinking about what are we going to make the fort out of? Do we have it? Can we find pillows and blankets and all those kinds of things? So really think about those activities. Anything like that is really great for all your children to do. Everybody likes, and the more the merrier is what I say when you're thinking about activities. When we're thinking about making games out of sort of routine activities, some of my students have done a few home visits, and one of my students says, I don't want you to come to my house again because my mother made me have a chore board. You could do a bingo for chores. So you could have like a bingo game over the week, and every time that they did a chore, they could try to go for a bingo, and you could have a prize at the end. You could do color sorting, so they could work on matching skills, matching by colors, matching types of clothing, putting your socks together, putting all your shirts together, putting your pants together when they have to go back in the drawers. I'm always, like I said, I'm full of fun, thinking of fun. How about a conga line to the recycling bin, dance party to the recycling bin, any of those kinds of things. I think many of the students that I've worked with who have charged, they love a little bit of unexpected or a little fun thrown in there. Anything to make doing your chores spicy. Think about yourselves. Like, I love to clean to music. The louder, the better. So, maybe some of our kids like to do something like that and making it really fun. thinking about chores, and they're called chores for a reason, right? Because we have to do that. I love the sandwich idea. So it's really what you're doing is you're taking the real stuff and you're putting it between the fun stuff. So, maybe that what we're going to do is that they really like a particular TV show, and maybe they like to listen to music. So maybe we'll listen to one Taylor Swift song, or one Rihanna song, and then we're going to make our bed. And then we're going to, after do that, we're going to play a game, or we're going to do something else that they really like. So it's really putting some, what we call less fun on the positive bread. So thinking about having to do that kind of idea. And I think that works out really well for kids, having it in between. So you can remind them as they're making the bed and doing the chore in between. Oh, but remember what we're doing afterwards. We're going to go ride bikes, or we're going to go, play a game with dad or something like that. Incorporating choices into chores. So I have an example here. This was, we have a teaching kitchen at our school, and here's some of the chores that you can do. And I would use myself as a model. So I might say, oh, I'm going to wipe the table. And then you could say, well, what do you want to pick? And then do like a turn-taking kind of thing so that they don't have to do everything, but they could pick one or two. You could put different family members' name. You could rotate the chores among the family. You could make a chore chart. Maybe this week you have to make your bed 2 days a week, and you have to bring your laundry to the washer 1 day a week. So having a chore chart. Think about chunking chores, not that they have so many, but short amounts together, and lots of turn taking, and make sure that they know that everybody in the family participates when they're doing some of the chores. The next slide has, it's just a chart of what a typical child might do. And, it's no judging if your kids do it or they don't do it. But they really say toddlers up to 3 years old could help make a bed. They could take their clothes to the laundry basket. They could put away clean clothes, clean up toys. And Sarah, don't worry, I'm not quizzing you about what your kids do. Then they have something that preschoolers could do, elementary, 10 to 12, the tween years, and then teenage and plus, what they could help do. That's just for typical. So, but it just gives you an idea of some different kinds of chores our kids could help out with. And just food for thought for you guys. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is, I think this is really a fun thing for over summer, is having a theme day. So like maybe every Saturday is a theme day, or once a month is a theme day. And you could select a theme. So you brainstorm as the family. You could put themes into a hat and pick. You could have your kids use their imagination and decide what they want to do. You could dress up to match the theme. You could make food for the theme. Even if your child is a G-tube user, I've had lots of kids who have G-tubes and they still love to cook. Sometimes they like to taste if they could a little bit, or they like making food for others. They enjoy that. You could decorate a room for the theme. You could do music to the themes. You could pick a movie for the theme. There's just so many things that you could do with themes. I just put a few ideas. You could do colors, holidays, sports, luau. You could do backwards day, where you started, instead of having breakfast, you could have dinner for breakfast. Lunch could be lunch. You could have breakfast for dinner. You could do everything, wear your clothes backwards. You could pick heroes or superheroes. We know many of our kids love characters, Disney characters, Marvel characters. All those kinds of things are just some few ideas that you could do to make things fun. And I'm going to let Megan's going to do the next slide, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. your kids are on vacation and structuring their fun and developing these routines and calendars for your child is that they can still work on social skills, and we can still incorporate teaching and practicing social skills during all of these different activities. So you can work on social skills when you're setting up your calendar, when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for the day. So like Sharon said, take turns making choices for what you want to do. So that is turn taking and practicing a social skill right there. You can also practice social skills during games, when doing your chores, when on community outings and doing recreational activities, and when you go to doctor's appointments. So some different types of skills that you can continue to work on include those greetings. So initiating a greeting, saying hello to someone. You can practice that right in the morning, greeting all your family members. If you go into the community, greeting people within the community that are around you. You can work on sharing and taking turns, and you can even break these skills down into kind of smaller bites if that's a little bit easier. So with sharing and taking turns, practicing gaining attention. So if you're playing a board game, having them tap their peer or tap you or their sibling to get their attention. Make a request in whatever mode of communication that they use, and then also responding to a request. So if you're playing a game that involves dice or something like that, having them request those dice, having them give those dice, or even during chores, what materials do you need for your chores and how can you have them request those materials or give you those materials? You can also work on reciprocal interactions, so engaging in a back and forth exchange, whether that's in play, so working on exchanging materials during a play session, or when you're conversing with each other, having a conversation, practicing taking turns within that conversation. Also working on just being together, so being present with one another, working on something together, whether that's a group art project or something you do together, or planting something in a garden and working in the soil together, or cooking together, just really doing something with another person and being present together. You can also work on asking questions and answering questions. So if you're involved in a specific activity or chore, asking questions that are appropriate for that activity or that are related to that activity, as well as answering questions. This could also be really helpful when going out in the community and going to like the doctor, helping them to practice answering certain questions. You can also work on emotion identification. So talk about how they're feeling during different activities. Notice how they look, how maybe they're acting, what their tone of voice or vocalizations look like, and pointing that out to them to show, hey, your face is kind of scrunched up. Looks like you might be angry that I asked you to mop the floor. So really helping them to identify those emotions and then give them some different coping strategies to manage those emotions and allow them to practice those while engaging in those different activities. So you can really work on social skills throughout all aspects of the day.
I'm going to talk a little bit about social stories. I think social stories is really a great tool to have in your toolbox. It really helps teach your child about what is going to happen and what is expected. So you might say, who's going to be going on, say you're going to, today we are going to go to the mall. Who's going to go? Mom's going to go, their sister's going to go, but we're only going to 3 stores instead of the whole mall, or what they think is going to happen. So it lessens the anxiety. It really talks about how you have to behave and what might happen. We're going to go to the food court for lunch. It might be loud, and loudness might be something that your child has issues with, but we'll sit at a table in the corner so we're not right in the middle of everything. So really thinking about who's going to go, what's going to happen, how we should behave and act, and what might happen within those activities that you'll be doing. And things will be coming up all vacation long that you could really use a social story for. So you could use a social story about going to the doctors. You could use a social story about going to your boss's picnic that maybe your child's never been to their house before. You could ask your boss to send pictures, will we be outside? You send me some pictures of where we're going to go? You might tell your child, you can bring your folding chair that you like, or if they're in a stroller, you'll go in your stroller, and really thinking about that. It really helps students and children to think about what's going to happen, especially around challenging behaviors, so they know what to expect. And maybe how long that you're going to go for. Maybe the first time you're going somewhere new, you don't stay for the whole time, but a short time, so that they really can understand and build up their skills to stay somewhere longer and longer. So social stories help our students and our children anticipate what's going to happen at the event. It offers them opportunities to ask questions, and those are one of the social skills Megan was, thinking about for social skills. Who, what will I do? What could they bring to do? So maybe they can bring their iPad for a little bit, but maybe they have to talk to 3 people. That might be a skill that you might have to say. You have to say hello to 3 people, then you get your iPad. So you're working on those kinds of social skills. Again, thinking about teaching strategies. This is what's going to happen at the beginning. Here's the middle part of what we're going to do. So the beginning part is we're going to get there. You're going to say hello to Aunt. You're going to say hello to your aunt. The middle part is that you will play one game. The end part is that you will go in the car to come home. And you can really personalize it for each of your children. And it might help other children in your family to anticipate what's going to happen. Social stories are a really great way to help our kids be more successful in situations that they're not so sure about. And we just have some examples of topics. So Megan and I, we worked together. We talked about going back to school. You might have a social story about that. You might have a social story about like your hygiene, about showering or private, what's not private. You might have a social story. We had a social story about friendship club. We had stories about making cereal. One of my students wanted to know, what we would do if we were going to make cereal in the morning, or making chocolate milk, all of those kinds of things. So we talked about those kinds of things for social stories. You really can use anything to make social stories. That's just a quick overview about social stories.
And one way that you can really use social stories is go or kind of group of activities that you can engage in over vacation is taking your child out into the community to do fun things, or to do things that, just errands you need to run, or maybe scheduling appointments is also something that you probably do during vacation. And so having those social stories can be really helpful. Going out into the community for just kind of fun activities can be really helpful for promoting independence for your child in terms of providing sort of lifetime hobbies and leisure activities. It can also be helpful for teaching social skills and that increasing that social skill development, as well as allowing your child to build connections within the community and to meet people within the community that will then hopefully help them as they get older and leave school and are thinking about what the next steps are after that. So having those connections in the community can be really helpful for that transition. And by engaging in these community outings, that can be really helpful for that. So some different places that you might go for your community outings could be stores. Again, this might be something you have to do, right? You have to go grocery shopping. You have to go, you have to go to Target, buy things you need for the house, things like that. You could also go to restaurants for meals, parks, pools, recreational centers like the Y. Going to the library can be a really fun activity. or other sports complexes, gyms, or places like museums or the zoo. And so to kind of prepare for community outings, because they can be very stressful going into a new environment that has a lot of overwhelming sensory stimulation, it might be helpful to kind of prepare for what's going to happen. And so as Sarah talked about, having that calendar system is really important, and making sure that you include those community outings on that calendar system. So designating and showing your child that, hey, today we're going to go to the zoo, or today we're going to go to the grocery store. And so making sure they know what to expect, and to expect that that outing is going to occur. Then you can also have a social story for what that will be like. So like Sharon said, really describe what you're going to do. So today we're going to go to Target, and what that will look like. We're going to go to Target. We're looking for these 3 items to get at Target. And when we go to Target, you need to stand by the cart with me. You can pick up the item off the shelf and put it into the cart if that is something that they can do. So reading that social story beforehand, even a couple days beforehand, to kind of prepare them for that outing. Also creating a routine for when you do go to different places. So when you go to Target, having that sort of beginning, middle, and end to that sort of event that you do, so the child knows what to expect when they go to Target. So when they go to Target, these are the things that I have to do. This is what I can expect. And incorporating those into the social story can be helpful as well, the more times you kind of go to Target. And then having a plan. So it can also be helpful to almost create like an activity schedule. So a mini schedule within the schedule, where you sort of make those lists that Sarah and Sharon both said. That doesn't have to be anything super elaborate, but list out what you're going to do when you go to that store, so that they can check it off once you have those different tasks completed, and then they know when that activity is going to end. And then building in some reinforcement for that. So like Sharon said, when you do these different activities, you earn a minute of time like that, or different little rewards for them. That doesn't have to be a tangible item, but can be earning time on something to help sort of increase the likelihood that that's going to be a positive experience. And then like Sharon said, start out small. The first time you go for those community outings, maybe start with a 15-minute outing. It doesn't have to be a long outing, just kind of exposing them to the environment. Some things that might be helpful to bring with you during the outing is something called a personal passport, which is, there's an example of it on the slide here, but just sort of a quick explanation. It just sort of gives a little snapshot of who your child is and how someone might interact with your child. So that if someone does come up to you in the community, if you're at like a local park and a kid wants to come and play with your child, it gives them some information about, how do I communicate, or how might I say hello, and how might they say hello back to me, just to give some education to the people within the community. It can also be helpful to have sensory items for your child if it does become too overwhelming. Having that sort of visual checklist can be helpful, as well as a way for them to be able to communicate with people within the community. So maybe having a laminated communication board, which Sarah will show some examples of later on, where someone can say hello to your child and really help to foster those social skills. Another sort of similar to community outings, but something else that you can try to get your child involved in, are different recreational activities within the community. And these really help, again, foster that independence, those friendships. So this is where we think about when we were kids and we went to day camps or played sports. That's where we develop our friendships. And so by sort of promoting these activities, you can help promote those friendships and friendship skills. Some different ideas could be camps, whether they're day camps or, if possible, like sleepaway camps. Thinking about different sports leagues or classes within the community. So like baseball, soccer, yoga classes, swimming lessons, or community art classes. Other activities within communities could be like horseback riding or water sports like canoeing, kayaking, paddleboarding, engaging in different outdoor activities like fishing or hiking, or joining like a running or a walking club within the community. And so again, these likely will take some planning to do beforehand instead of just kind of throwing your kid into these activities. There are some things we can do to help prepare you as well as your child for participating in these activities. So reaching out to activity organizers to make sure if modifications or accommodations are needed for your child, that you can kind of talk with them and determine whether or not that particular activity is going to be most suitable for your child. If there are different camps or things or classes, like exercise classes, communicating any medical and physical needs if necessary to make sure that modifications are made for those different classes or activities. Also developing a communication plan. So how will you as a parent or caregiver communicate with those organizers? And then as well as how will your child communicate with others? So if they use different modes of communication, how can you help plan for that so that they can interact with other kids within those activities? And then how can you provide some education and possibly training for the other kids, as well as the sort of organizers of those activities to help them to be more integrated within the activity? You might also need to break down activities into smaller segments or components. So if they are going to maybe play t-ball or baseball, how can you break down those different specific skills into smaller sort of chunks to teach as opposed to learning it all at once? And then creating those sort of daily schedules. So for, a day camp, knowing ahead of time what activities will occur during each day, and then making a schedule at home or working with the activity organizers to develop that schedule so that your child has some predictability for what will happen during those days. And then creating those social stories to help kind of prep your child for what to expect. And then during those activities, so again, developing routines, and similar to, again, what Sharon said that, maybe the child doesn't go to the full baseball practice, but maybe they go the first 15 minutes and then slowly increase that time. But developing a routine about going to those different activities, providing choices for your child about what activities they do, as well as within those activities, trying to build in, choices as you can. Modeling what you want your child to do during those activities can also be helpful. So if you're taking an art class, modeling, what the different skills are you want them to engage in, and then guiding them through that as needed. And continuing to make modifications to the activities as necessary, whether it's different sensory components, different physical components that you might have to make changes. Making sure you're taking breaks, promoting interactions, but also as a parent, taking a step back, or as a caregiver, taking that step back to help your child to be independent and practice different skills without you kind of being right on top of them as well. Another sort of outing that might occur is appointments. So again, during vacation, it's a really good time to schedule a lot of those medical appointments that you might have been putting off during the school year. So again, there are some things that we can do to help make those more successful. So incorporating those into the calendar, like Sara said, making sure that the child knows what days to expect those appointments on, and then reading a social story again to help sort of prepare them for those appointments. Creating a schedule for what those appointments will look like then. So first we'll check in at the desk, then we'll go back and see the doctor and what might occur during that appointment. It can also be helpful to review coping skills. Different appointments, whether it's going to the doctor, getting your hair cut, things like that can be very stressful. And so how can we then manage those big emotions and practicing that beforehand? And then during appointments, making sure that there are lots of breaks, choices, practicing those coping skills, and offering rewards for for positive behaviors during those appointments. And then afterwards, creating experience stories, which we'll go over in a bit, to kind of review what that experience was like and to help them reflect on those different experiences. So, Sharon, do you want to go over experience stories?
Sure.
Okay.
So after you've done your activity or your event, so whether it's a recreational event, a shopping experience, you're going to review with your child. So collect anything that you can from your experience. So if you went to a restaurant, you might want to take, if they have a menu that you can take home, pictures that you've taken. If you go on a nature walk, I'm always stuffing a bag or my pockets full of something so that we can create a memory book with your child. It helps reinforce vocabulary, so you can talk about who you saw, what you did, maybe how you felt. It's a great way to build memories and document. So if you're a scrapbooker, you're already ahead of the game because you're creating those memory books. But they're really experience stories for your child, but it's personalized to your child. It helps build literacy skills. Who went? Megan went. Where did we go? McDonald's. What did you eat? Hamburger. Let's talk about all of that. And then you can save your books and you can build a personal library. So you can look at your books over and over again. So you know how kids always have their favorite books, and maybe some of their experience stories would become their favorite books, especially for a really good memory. And I also find sometimes when it was maybe not such a good memory, like remember I had to get my hair cut and I cried, and they love the drama of that. And that might become a favorite book because there's a lot of drama around it. It's a great way to work on those teaching strategies that we just can't get away from as teachers, that clear beginning, middle, and end. There's so much for experience stories, but I encourage you all to try to make an experience book about one thing with your child and do it together. That's the most important part, that you do it together. I made a birthday book with one of my students, and I collected the wrapping paper, and we had all these other things. And the part that I forgot was to put the candle. And she said to me, she was nonverbal, and we're putting the story together, and she's going and blowing, making a blowing noise with her mouth. And I forgot to put the candle in, and that was her favorite part, was blowing out the candles. So really having your child be part of making the stories. And when I make experience books, when I write the author, because you always have to have a title and the author, one of the authors is you and the other one is your child. That's just a quick overview. Sarah?
Great. So last, we'll talk about communication boards for home. Communication at home is such an important part of being prepared for vacation. Your child at school is used to professionals who are well versed in how to use their assistive technology. If they're signers, they're able to sign and have a conversation with them. They understand communication boards, and they can use them well. So when your child is home for vacation, maybe they're seeing family members who they haven't seen in a while, and they're not up to date on how to use your child's assistive communication device. Or maybe you're going to be going out and doing an activity with people your child has never met before, and signing just isn't going to be, it's not going to be understood by everyone. So having a communication board, and a simple communication board that's easily accessed, can be very helpful. So to prepare for this, You can reach out to your student's classroom teacher or to your student's speech and language pathologist to come up with different strategies, and also talk to them about making sure that if they are AAC users, if you know you're going on a vacation to the beach, that they update their device to have all of those key vocabulary words that you'll be talking about. Is there information about sunblock? Is there information about the sand and how that might feel? Is there information about the seagulls that are going to be there and the sun and those strategies? So making sure that you collaborate with your school team before you go on vacation is very important. But the next few slides are just some examples of communication boards that will be a part of this presentation. When it is on the Charge website, you're able to download and print these and adapt them to make them fit the needs of your child. So an emotion board, this one might be really helpful to have in a few locations in the house. Maybe it's something that's in the child's bedroom that's easy to access when they wake up. You can discuss how they're feeling. And here's an extended version of that. Here's some activities of daily living. Again, you could cut these out and make them a part of a chore chart. You could leave them together and create that bingo board, as Sharon mentioned before. Here's some others. Meal times. A lot of our students use different variations of the symbols for meals, so we have both options here. If we're talking about setting the table as part of an activity to get ready for a meal, we have the different items needed, some places, and different activities. So again, these could just make it a little bit easier for communication, and then the more finished help, yes, no, and bathroom. Some of those things that if they're doing an activity at a camp and they need some really quick language pictures, these ones are readily accessible as your students and your child's camp counselor is learning their communication. Have this more readily accessible for that easier, low frustration communication for your child. And again, those will be available on the website